So, before Space Jam: A New Legacy, this was the most recent Looney Tunes movie, meaning it took them nearly 20 years before they'd be back in action again. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. With the upcoming release of Space Jam: A New Legacy, since I already reviewed the original film, I now wanted to talk about the other Looney Tunes movie, Looney Tunes Back in Action. So before I begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were if you already saw it or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's jump right into it and let's talk about Looney Tunes Back in Action. This finds Daffy Duck, sick of ceding the spotlight to Bugs Bunny, now fired by studio boss Kate Houghton, played by Jenna Elfman, when he demands equal pay and billing. Daffy goes on a studio lot rampage, taking down security guard DJ Drake, played by Brendan Fraser, in the process, who is also sacked, but when DJ's A-list actor dad, played by Timothy Dalton, is kidnapped by the evil Mr. Chairman, played by Steve Martin, DJ and Daffy try to rescue him, while also being pursued by Kate and Bugs. This is directed by Joe Donte, best known for his work on the Gremlins movies, and it was initially planned to be a direct sequel to Space Jam. However, when Michael Jordan refused to do a second movie, Warner Brothers tried reworking the film to be a spy comedy called Spy Jam with Jackie Chan, and then Race Jam with Jeff Gordon, but both fell through. But eventually, Donte was brought in, working from a script by Larry Doyle, and it turns out that Donte, a longtime fan of the Looney Tunes, shared original Looney Tunes director Chuck Jones' infamous sentiment regarding the characterization of them in Space Jam, and he set out to make what he called the anti-Space Jam with this film. And I'd say he succeeded, though at the same time, this was nowhere near as popular as Space Jam, and it wound up being a box office bomb. And this goes back to what I mentioned in my review of Space Jam, which is that many people who grew up with that film and still hold it dearly to them to this day weren't exactly big Looney Tunes fans otherwise. Most of that film's success stemmed from the popularity of Michael Jordan, the NBA, and the marketing done by Nike in its merchandising efforts. So with all those elements gone, and with the Looney Tunes now more in the spotlight for a film centered more around the film industry, it unfortunately didn't have as wide of an appeal as its predecessor did. But does that mean it's a bad movie? No, not at all. Now, it's not amazing, and we'll get into issues shortly, but this is a fairly decent, if flawed, follow-up to Warner Brothers' smash hit that I think is still worth a watch. So let's start with the Looney Tunes themselves. They are by far the absolute best thing about this film, and whereas Space Jam mostly captured the essence of all these characters, but with some deviations, this on the other hand captured almost to a T the very same spirit of the classic cartoons, and as a longtime fan of those cartoons, I was very happy to see that. Now, while Space Jam drew some influence from Who Framed Roger Rabbit with its combination of live action and animation, but keeping things mostly confined to Looney Tunes land, this feels like something that was much more in the vein of Roger Rabbit, while not coming off as a total ripoff. Similar to that film, this partially centers around professionals in the movie industry, with the Looney Tunes themselves being portrayed as the stars of their own shorts, and part of the film takes place on the Warner Brothers set. Though unlike Space Jam, where all the main Looney Tunes mostly had an equal amount of screen time after Bugs and Daffy and were all fairly prominent, this features Bugs and Daffy in the only real starring roles, with everyone else either appearing in cameos like Porky Pig and Foghorn Leghorn, or only having a major role in one or two scenes and leaving. The likes of Elmer Fudd, Marvin the Martian, the Tasmanian Devil, Yosemite Sam, and Wile E. Coyote all go in and out as henchmen of the Acme Chairman. And in these sequences of Bugs and Daffy going back and forth with all their enemies, it was fun, as it felt like extended versions of the classic shorts, where they're trying to outwit them for 5 minutes straight. Now, they might not be laugh-out-loud hilarious at all times, but for what they were, they got some good laughs out of me, especially the Elmer Fudd sequence. Plus, it was good especially to see the classic Bugs-Daffy dynamic in play, with Daffy's jealousy of Bugs being a big driving force throughout the film, which made for some fun banter. Plus, the way Bugs was written, he was, as usual, the sharpest character in the entire movie, full of self-referential gags, one-liners, and pop culture references that made his characterization a major improvement over how he was in Space Jam. Speaking of those pop culture references, this is definitely something akin to a film buff sort of movie, with plenty of tongue-in-cheek references to classic films, including a great parody of Psycho, as well as some well-done ways of Warner Brothers making fun of itself, such as one scene where a cartoon Shaggy and Scooby-Doo berate Matthew Lillard for how he portrayed Shaggy in the live-action Scooby-Doo movie, which was, at the time, still very recent. And what I especially liked here is that this did a good job of having the Looney Tunes carry the film without having to sacrifice their own personalities by making decisions they wouldn't normally make in order to stretch the runtime. Instead, this feels like something you'd see in older films starring classic comedy groups like, say, the Marx Brothers, where you'd have other characters, in this case the live-action humans, deal with a lot of the serious plot-driven stuff, while the Looney Tunes act in support of them, though still a major consistent force throughout the film. But as for those human characters though, they're easily the film's weakest element. I don't even have so much of an issue with the story itself, as I'm not expecting anything overly complex with a Looney Tunes movie. Like, the fact that we got something as weird as Space Jam still astonishes me in hindsight. But these characters are neither all that funny, nor all that interesting. Now, Brendan Fraser certainly tries here, and I've always found him to be a very charismatic guy. And because of that, he'd be a great fit in general when paired with characters like the Looney Tunes, or even other classic characters like the Muppets as another example. But his character here is given a bland personality, being the everyman who has a father with his whole double life, and he now has to get involved with said double life. And what we get is this weird mix where, at times, he tries to be the straight man to the Looney Tunes antics, while in other instances, he also tries to be as wacky as them. There are times when, say, for example, Daffy will say something bizarre and Fraser reacts to it like he has 5 heads, but then there are other times we get him doing pratfalls, or he's yelling or getting out of control himself, and it would lead to this weird middle ground where he's trying to have it both ways, but never going quite as extreme in either direction. And as a result, he feels both sloppily written and not all that funny. There are times I occasionally chuckled at him, but those would be rare. Same goes for Jenna Elfman, who I found to have zero chemistry with Fraser, despite the fact that they were really trying to set these two up for a very obvious romance from the beginning that I didn't totally believe. But it's the same deal where she's paired up with Bugs for a good part of the film, and one minute she's reacting as if she's put off by his antics, but then another minute she's going along with him. Now, it's not quite as bad as Fraser, as she's not given as much to do, but then again, that's also part of the problem. A lot of the time, she can just be there, or all she's really doing is just going along with what everyone else is doing, and nothing else. So I found her to be one of the weaker parts of the film. And this also wastes a number of other solid names who go in and out, and again, they're given inconsistent material that never really fully utilizes their potential, like Joan Cusack, Heather Locklear, Bill Goldberg, and the aforementioned Dalton. The only exception is Steve Martin, who's meant to be very over the top and silly as the chairman of Acme. He's the only one who I'd say is written to be consistent, and he comes off like a live-action cartoon character. Now again, I'm not saying he was given material that was laugh-out-loud hilarious, as the whole joke most of the time was that he just said things in an overly enthusiastic and goofy manner. But considering what he had to work with, he does a fine enough job, and he made me laugh a number of times, and that's a credit to Steve Martin's talents, as his performance elevates a lot of the material. But while the live-action storyline and characters were something of a letdown otherwise, I didn't flat-out dislike this movie, as the material given to the Looney Tunes themselves was strong enough that it did balance out anytime we got bogged down with a moment that tries to play things too straight, or if a joke falls flat. So, for what it is, it works enough for me. Looney Tunes Back in Action isn't bad. It's certainly not great, and it also doesn't have the same nostalgia power that Space Jam has, but it's entertaining, if inconsistent. While the Looney Tunes are written much better here than Space Jam and do provide much of the film's laughs, the stuff surrounding the live-action characters is really weak, outside of Steve Martin. It's a film that sometimes couldn't tell if it wanted its live-action characters to play it totally straight next to the Looney Tunes, or have them be as wacky as them, and it suffers as it never has them go too far in one direction or the other. But the film's weaknesses are saved by the amount of good that it does, and it makes for a decent enough time. Looney Tunes Back in Action gets a 6.5 out of 10. So now that I've reviewed both Space Jam and Back in Action, stay tuned, because up next will be my review of Space Jam: A New Legacy, as well as my ranking of all three films. But in the meantime, let me know, did you see Looney Tunes Back in Action, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like it more than Space Jam? Do you want to see more Looney Tunes films in the future? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.